It was the beginning of summer. My darling husband Jay and I were going camping at my favorite place in the whole world. This was a wilderness campground with a crystal clear lake and hiking trails, a river for canoeing, fishing, etc. This was going to be a special weekend where we leave the kids, careers, and all behind for just some time for the two of us and nature. It was a Saturday morning and Jay had to work, so it was a little late before we could leave. We got to the place we were going and there was only two of us, so we set up our tents and all that and got done some hiking. Had a picnic at the waterfall, etc. Later, we came back to camp. We built a fire and shared a bottle of wine till the darkness and fireflies set in. It was a full moon and everything was beautiful. I got this brilliant idea to do something that I haven't done in many years. I wanted to go skinny dipping in the lake. Well, Jay had already drank too much and he was really tired from having to work earlier that day, and all the hiking didn't help him any, so he didn't want to go. Also, there was no one camping except for the two of us. If there had been, I wouldn't have gone, at least not skinny dipping, but I felt grimy and sweaty and just was not going to be able to sleep without cleaning up. So, Jay decides to lie down and rest in the tent and I take off down the moonlit trail. My beach bag loaded with biodegradable soap and shampoo, change of clothes and other bath items. While walking down to the lake, my spidey senses kind of picked up on something. I ignored it though. Once I got there, I undressed, put my clothes on the roots of a big pine tree and dove in. I bathed, swam, and enjoyed the relaxation. It was almost like a trip to the spa for me. Finally, I got out. I was standing on the shore getting dressed, and I had that funny little growing feeling, like when you're being watched. My concern was not a person. This time of the year we had not seen a soul all day long and no one lived close by. My concern was that there could be a bear or some other wild animal. Just to describe the lake kind of sits in a bowl. There is a cliff, but it's not a steep cliff. It slopes. There are trees and forest around it. This is relevant. So, while getting dressed, I looked up toward the cliff, and my heart felt like it was about to stop. A person stepped out of the shadows of the trees. Just from his silhouettes, I couldn't see his face. I thought it was Jay. Maybe he changed his mind about swimming, which was unlikely since when he goes to sleep, he sleeps like a log. Or maybe he was worried about me. I had been enjoying the lake so much that I had been there for probably an hour. So just assuming it was him, I just started joking with him. Sorry, but you just missed a great swim. Or something dumb like that. Normally he would joke back with me or say something grumpy if he was irritated that I had been down there too long. But he didn't say anything. All the while I'm pulling on my clothes, still talking to him, but he never said a word. When I had all my clothes on and was ready to start walking back, he stepped back into the shadows of the forest. And at that point, I was pretty sure it wasn't Jay, so I grabbed my stuff and ran down the trail as fast as I could. One time, I thought I heard voices, but I was so scared I may have imagined it. I got back and Jay, of course, was sound asleep. I was ready to pack up and go home and thoroughly creeped out, but he was sleeping and I didn't want to get him up. I didn't sleep at all that night until he got up the next morning to make coffee. Every noise I heard during the night, I thought it was whoever that guy was who was watching me again. Jay was very upset and scared for me when I told him what happened, and we hiked to the place where I saw the guy standing. There were 2 sets of footprints there, and from what I could tell, he had probably been there a while. That was one of the scariest experiences I've ever had. I think about how vulnerable I was in the lake that night, and still creeped out that some guy was just watching me swim and watching me get dressed. This experience happened to me while camping in the wilderness of eastern Washington near the Canadian border. 2 friends and myself were sitting around the campfire. We were camped in a large flat about midway up the mountain we were hiking. All of a sudden, we heard a strange screaming noise. The screams were shrill and came in consecutive 1 to 2 second bursts. Here's my attempts to describe the noise. It was something like, "Arrah! Arrah!" The noise was getting closer, and I asked my more wilderness experienced friend if it could possibly be a predator. I know mountain cats can make screaming noises. He said he didn't think so, but we grabbed our rifles. The noise is getting closer, and we can see an animal coming towards us straight up a fairly steep grade of mountain at a fast pace. I would clock the speed at 25 miles per hour easily. It was about the speed of someone on a motorbike going at a fast rate. We grabbed our rifles and took aim as the animal bolted straight towards our campsite. But what we saw next was not a predator. It was a deer, bounding in huge leaps, screaming, entirely on his hind legs. This deer was hopping like a pogo stick with his forelegs held in front of it. The look of pure terror in his eyes reflected in the firelight will haunt me forever. I've looked for video of deers on their hind legs and such behavior, but I've only ever seen deers getting food out of trees or possibly fighting another deer on their hind legs. My friends joke and say the deer got into some bad mushrooms, but it was truly the strangest experience in my entire life. I'm usually a lone man adventurer, especially when it comes to hiking, because my friends are pretty inactive people. So whenever I take them hiking, they usually slow me down. So, one Saturday afternoon, I decided to go hiking, even though it was about 2 p.m. already. I've hiked the same trail plenty of times, but only in the early morning. So, knowing the length of this trail, I knew that by the time I finished, it would be close to sunset. The trail was about a 9-mile round trip from a steady incline coming back up. From the trailhead to about halfway, the trail runs through a thick covered forest, and a remaining of the trail runs along the side of an exposed mountain. Even at the peak of the sun, light barely penetrates the thick treetops of the forest. So when I started the trail, I passed a few hikers who were coming back. But realizing that I was maybe one of the few people who were still on the trail, I sped up to pace to make sure I finished before sunset. Everything went fine while hiking as I powered through the trail fairly fast, getting to the end, taking a quick 5-minute break, and then turning around. By the time I was halfway, it was about 4 p.m. The whole way back I was alone on the trail coming, since I passed a few people who already made the turn around. The sun was already starting to hide behind some of the mountains, and the forest was already really dark. So I powered my way up the incline. The whole way, there was not a living soul on the trail besides me. I was already kind of creeped out being by myself on this trail, so I just listened to music and tried not to pay attention to anything else but the trail. As I was walking, I saw a black mass, about the size of maybe a rabbit or a skunk, run across the trail. It definitely wasn't an animal, because it was too fast and there was no defining color, shape, or anything. It was just a mass. It freaked me out a little bit, so I started to jog the trail. The whole time, I can see the light dwindling and it was getting darker by the second. As I was jogging, I just had the feeling something or someone was following me. I knew no one was behind me because the whole trip back it was just me on the trail. I pulled out my pocket knife that I always carry with me just in case I had to shank something or someone. About halfway through the forest, I grew tired of jogging, so I decided just to walk but keep a fast pace. As I slowed down, I had the urge to look back, and I did. I took a look over my shoulder a few times. I kept a fast pace walking, and for about a good half mile or so I was close to the trailhead when I decided to look over my shoulder again. When I did, I saw a human-like black mass, trailing behind me about 30 or so feet behind. This mass had a definitive head and upper body shape, but anything below the waist was just a black mass. As soon as I noticed this mass, just in the blink of an eye, it darted into the trees. Of course, scaring the hell out of me. I darted for the trailhead. Thankfully, I was closer than I expected, and never was so happy to see sunlight in my car. I was running so fast to my car that I didn't even realize that there were still people in the parking lot at the trailhead who were getting ready to leave as well, until I was sitting in my car shaking and trying to get myself together before I drove off. I haven't gone hiking since that day, and it's been over 2 months. I did a little research on the trail, and the trail used to be a travel place for gold mining towns. It was forgotten for almost 100 years until it was retraced in 1980. A couple of years ago, I went hiking alone on different trails in the Blue Ridge Parkway. For some reason, I thought it would be okay for a 20-something woman to go alone. Stupid, I know. I always visited Mount Mitchell, so I made the trek up there. This was on a Monday, so there weren't a ton of visitors. The path to the summit is paved, so it is fairly easy to walk, but it is a bit steep. I was a smoker at the time, so I was quite out of breath. I finally got to the top and stood to the side trying to catch my breath, and I see someone very close to me out of the corner of my eye. I look up and it's a man, probably in his late 40s, greasy and dark brown hair. He says, "Hey, I noticed you took a while to get up here and you're breathing really hard. Are you okay?" I was kind of taken back, but I replied saying I was fine and that I'm a smoker, and I kind of laughed to make light of the situation. He stood there looking at me, so I made a little nod to let him know that I was going to walk away. I walked over to the podiums that show you the direction you're looking and what mountains and cities are the way in that distance. He followed me. He started talking out of nowhere about how he had recently been divorced and was part of a men's group that traveled around the country to lots of famous tourist spots. He asked me where I was from and I told him. He proceeded to tell me really intimate details of why he got divorced. He told me how he suspected his wife was cheating on him, so he hid in a closet one night and caught her and a coworker in bed together. He grumbled, "They both paid dearly for that night." I tried to make it visibly obvious that I was uncomfortable, but he kept talking and asking me questions without pausing to let me answer. I came to the conclusion that he was simply lonely and wanted someone to talk to. Then I realized there was no one else with this man the entire time, and I hadn't noticed any men's group, but maybe they split up and went their own separate ways for a while. At any rate, I became increasingly nervous, so I let him know that I was going to head back down to the gift shop. Again, he started following me. There were lots of trails that branch off from the main path to the summit, but I wasn't interested in going on any of those since it was not very safe with this guy following me. I wasn't walking with the man now, but he was following me. He called to me loudly, "Hey!" I turned around and he was grinning ear to ear. His hair somehow looked even greasier. He said, "Why don't we go walking on one of these trails? I could show you a really good time." I replied, "No, thank you," sternly. I looked to my left and there were two elderly women sitting on a bench. I realized they had been watching us. One of the women called to the man, "I think it's time you let the young lady get going now." I gave her a soft smile and a nod. I turned around and walked at a brisk pace down the path, passing the gift shop, going straight to my car. The man hadn't followed me. That was my last hike of the day, and I'm glad that nothing worse happened to me that day while I was alone. I definitely won't go on outings like that by myself anymore. I had an interesting experience while camping with my husband a couple of weeks ago. It was a nice drive-in campsite, a corner spot next to some other campsites and woods on the other three sides. We had a nice day hiking, cooked some fajitas and s'mores over the fire, and then we settled into our tent to sleep. Later that night, I woke up and heard a weird noise. It sounded kind of like an electronic tone. Then, I heard what sounded like people talking right outside of the tent. "They better get out of there. I saw an opossum go in there." Thinking that there were other campers around walking around, I turned around and tried to go back to sleep. A couple of minutes later, I heard the strange tone noise again, and then what sounded like a cat meowing and walking around the tent. It sounded like my cat when it wants to be let into the house. I'm not about to let strange animals into my tent, so I just lay there and it stopped after about a minute. A couple of minutes later, I heard the tone once again. Then I heard a lower, gravelly voice talking outside the tent. "They better get out of there before I get them." All of this happened over the course of maybe 10 minutes. I didn't react as strongly as I possibly should have, but I was tired and thought at first it might be some kind of dream. My husband got up and left the tent to use the bathroom a little while later. He hadn't heard anything, and I didn't hear anything else after that. The next morning, while eating breakfast, I could hear the neighbor campers talking. One of their children, 5 to 7 years old at least, was upset with his brother because they heard some noise telling them to get out of the camper last night, and now his brother was denying that he heard anything. I'm not sure what exactly happened that night, but it was definitely creepy and interesting.